During dinner, my wife and my sister-in-law got into a heated argument. My mother immediately slapped my wife and kicked her out, telling her to go back to her parents. I instantly packed our things and took her away. The next day, my mother called me 66 times in a sheer panic. That evening, I brought my wife back to my parents' house for dinner as usual. My family had a tradition of getting together once a month on a Sunday, supposedly to keep the family close and bring some joy to my parents' empty nest in the suburbs. But for Harper, my wife, these dinners had never been a breeze. She still prepared meticulously, from picking out high-end organic fruit baskets to buying premium joint supplements for my parents. Yet, the moment we stepped through the front door, I could see a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. My mother, Martha, was standing in the kitchen. As soon as she saw my older brother, Brandon, and my sister-in-law Tiffany walk in, her face immediately lit up. Tiffany was holding a small designer paper bag, her voice as sweet as honey. "Mom, I saw this scarf and thought it would look so perfect on you, so I had to get it. I had a friend bring it over from Europe. It costs a fortune in the boutiques here." My mother picked up the thin silk scarf, stroking it and beaming from ear to ear. "Oh, my oldest daughter-in-law is always so thoughtful. It doesn't matter how expensive it is. It's the thought that counts." I stood nearby, glancing at the scarf. You could find that exact knockoff on any cheap online marketplace for next to nothing. But Tiffany had a silver tongue, anything that came out of her mouth sounded luxurious and precious. Meanwhile, Harper quietly placed the organic fruit basket and the premium supplements on the kitchen island, saying softly, "I brought some fruit and joint supplements for you and Dad. I heard Dad mention his knees were acting up last week. So I got the easy-to-swallow kind." My mother barely glanced at them and replied dismissively, "Yeah. Just leave them there. Don't go overboard next time. It's not like we're lacking any in this house." I saw Harper's hand freeze for a second. She bit her lip and gave a quiet nod. It was a soft remark, but enough to make anyone feel utterly unappreciated. I was about to speak up, but Harper gently tugged at my sleeve, signaling me to let it go. She was always like this, holding back just to keep the peace at the dinner table. But the more you hold back, the more people assume you don't feel the pain. The Sunday roast was quite lavish. My mother sat at the head of the table. My father, Arthur, sat next to her, quiet as usual. Brandon was eating and bragging about his business ventures, his mouth full of arrogant claims. He talked about a massive upcoming investment, how his friends in the finance sector were begging him to pool capital, and how he was definitely upgrading to a Porsche by the end of the year. My mother listened to her eldest son, her eyes sparkling, nodding occasionally with immense pride. Tiffany, sitting next to my mother, served food on top Brandon's plate while smoothly interjecting, "Brandon loves you so much, Mom. He keeps saying that when this big payout comes, he's going to remodel your entire kitchen and send you on a luxury cruise so you can show off to your friends." My mother smiled contentedly, then turned to look at Harper. That look wasn't fiercely hostile right from the start, but it always held a certain coldness, as if she were weighing whether her youngest daughter-in-law could ever measure up to the eldest. She placed a prime cut of roast beef onto Brandon's plate, then gave some to Tiffany. When it came to Harper, she merely said, "Eat up, why are you just sitting there?" Harper gave a slight nod. I put a piece of salmon on my wife's plate, trying to act oblivious. But the atmosphere around the dining table was growing increasingly suffocating. Suddenly, Tiffany looked across at my wife, a smirk playing on her lips. "You've been looking a bit thin lately, Harper. Work must be stressing you out. But you know, as a woman, no matter what you do, you should start thinking about having kids. You've been married for almost 3 years now." Harper's hand, holding her fork, stopped in midair. I looked up at Tiffany, but she remained entirely nonchalant, acting as if she had just offered a normal, caring remark. Hearing this, my mother immediately sighed. "Your sister-in-law is right. In other families, a daughter-in-law gives them a grandchild to hold within a year or two. In this house, we just keep waiting and waiting. I'm getting old, who knows if I'll ever get to hold a grandchild from my youngest son." Harper tried to keep her voice steady. "We are planning for kids, Mom. We've been to the doctor. And he told us just to stay healthy and not put too much pressure on ourselves. Tiffany let out a soft chuckle. Doctors always say that. But if a woman is too obsessed with her career and calculating her finances, sometimes the blessing of children just slips away, honey. My face began to feel hot. Tiffany, this is a private matter between my wife and me. You don't need to be so harsh. She immediately waved her hand defensively. Oh, come on, Kevin, why are you getting so tense? I'm only saying this because I care. Besides, Harper should know that being a wife isn't just about making money. It's about giving the family an heir and nurturing her husband's home. My mother put her fork down, her tone heavy. Tiffany is telling the truth. A woman who can't bear children makes a home feel cold and empty, no matter how successful she is. Harper looked down. I could see her eyes turning red, but she tried her best to hold it in. That was when Tiffany dropped another featherlight but incredibly venomous remark. Or maybe you're just calculating things too closely, afraid that if you have a kid, you won't have enough money to send back to your own parents? The entire dining room went dead silent. She hadn't just attacked Harper, she had insulted my in-laws. Over the years, Harper had never taken a single dime from my family. On the contrary, she and I regularly paid for my parents' medical bills, gifts, and living expenses. The money she sent to her own parents was from her own hard-earned paycheck, helping them out in their old age. They had done nothing to deserve being mocked. Harper slowly set her fork down. For the first time in years, she lifted her head and looked straight into my sister-in-law's eyes. Her voice trembled, but it was crystal clear. If you want to say something, say it directly to me. Don't use my fertility and my parents as a joke. I have kept quiet not because I am wrong, but because I wanted to keep a shred of respect for this family dinner. Tiffany's face instantly changed color. My mother was stunned, and then her eyes darkened with fury. I knew that with just that one sentence, the storm in this house had officially begun. Following Harper's words, the dining table felt as if all its warmth had been sucked out. The ceiling fan spun slowly overhead, each rotation echoing in the silence. The clinking of silverware stopped completely. I looked at my wife, seeing her sitting perfectly straight, her hands resting on her lap, trying desperately not to shake. But I knew exactly how much humiliation she had swallowed over the past few years to finally say those words. Tiffany paused for only a few seconds before swiftly setting her glass down, dabbing the corners of her eyes though not a single tear had fallen. Her voice choked up soft enough to sound victimized, yet loud enough so no one missed a word. I was just giving her advice for her own good, Mom. As an older sister-in-law, if I see her doing something wrong, I point it out. Yet she treats me like an outsider, as if I'm intentionally trying to ruin her. My mother's face instantly darkened. She had a very bizarre way of favoring Tiffany. As long as Tiffany smiled, flattered her, occasionally bought her a scarf, a sweater, or some cheap baked goods and called them premium, my mother believed it was pure filial piety. Meanwhile, Harper silently paid for medications, utility bills, and decent gifts, which my mother treated as a basic obligation. She slammed her hand on the table, glaring directly at my wife. Harper! Is that any way to speak? When your sister-in-law gives you advice, you should take it. You are the youngest daughter-in-law here, and you're already acting defiant. Do you want people to look at us and say this family doesn't know how to raise a proper daughter-in-law? I couldn't hold back anymore. Mom, Tiffany started it. She brought up our fertility issues and dragged Harper's parents into it. Harper is just defending herself. My mother snapped her head toward me, her eyes filled with rage and disappointment, as if I had just committed an unforgivable sin. Oh, so now your mother isn't even allowed to speak, right? You get married and suddenly you forget your own mother and brother. I'm not even dead yet, and you're defending your wife blindly. When I'm in the grave, you'll probably let your wife ruin everything. Her words made my heart sting. Elders in the family often brilliantly weaponize the concept of filial piety like a noose around their children's necks. If you don't agree with their wrongdoings, you are immediately labeled an ungrateful son. I was about to speak again, but Brandon set his wineglass down, clearing his throat to intervene. Kevin, Honestly, man, don't let a woman lead you around by the nose. Every family has a hierarchy. If the women in the house don't know how to yield, how can the family ever prosper? Mom said one thing, Tiffany said one thing, and you both talk back. That's chaos. I looked at my brother. He spoke with such perfectly rounded morals, always sounding like a worldly, experienced man. But over the last few years, whenever my parents got sick, they called me. I transferred the money for their medical bills. When the HVAC broke, I paid to fix it. When they were short on cash at the end of the month, my wife and I sent it over. Meanwhile, Brandon was only good at sitting at the dinner table talking about big business deals, saying grandiose things to make my mother look good in front of the relatives. Harper finally looked up. Her voice shook, but every word was distinct. I can tolerate it when Mom calls me clumsy or quiet. I can tolerate it when Tiffany says, I don't know how to please my in-laws. But our struggle to have children is a private pain. My parents in the countryside did nothing wrong to be mocked. I cannot stay silent forever. Tiffany seemed to have been waiting exactly for this. She immediately turned to my mother, raising her voice. See, Mom? See how vicious the youngest daughter-in-law is now? I say one thing, and she drags her parents in, acting like this whole family is bullying her. Honestly, Mom, you're too nice. That's why people walk all over you. My mother's face turned beet red. She stood up abruptly, her heavy wooden chair scraping harshly against the floor. My father, who had been silent the entire time, softly called out, Martha, enough. We're having dinner. But my mother waved him off violently. You shut up. It's because you stay quiet all the time that we have someone in this house who doesn't know their place. Then she pointed her finger right at Harper's face, her voice dropping like heavy stones onto the floor. Let me tell you something, a woman with no blessings needs to know how to bow her head. You haven't given this family a child, yet you have the nerve to be stubborn. And you dare argue with me? Do you think because Kevin defends you, you can say whatever you want? Harper choked back a sob. I saw her lips turn pale, but she did not lower her head. She looked at my mother, tears welling up in her eyes, yet still maintaining her respect. I respect you, Mom, but I refuse to be constantly insulted like this. I am a daughter-in-law, not a punching bag for this family's anger. The moment the words left her mouth, my mother lunged forward so fast I couldn't grab her hand in time. A dry, sharp slap echoed through the dining room. Harper stumbled sideways, her hand clutching her cheek. A red mark instantly appeared in her face, and her lip was bleeding where her teeth had caught it. The entire room went dead silent. I shot up from my chair. In that split second, my ears were ringing. I could hear my mother's heavy breathing, I couldn't hear Tiffany's fake gasp of shock. And I couldn't even see the food on the table. I only saw my wife. The woman who had endured everything for me for so long had just been struck by my own mother. Right in front of me. My mother wasn't done. She gritted her teeth, spitting out every word. Get out and go back to your parents. This house does not harbor a daughter-in-law who dares to talk back to her mother-in-law. Harper stood perfectly still, tears falling, but she didn't cry out loud. She just turned to look at me. That look hurt me more than any words of blame ever could. It wasn't asking me who I would choose. It was asking if she still had to endure this today. I stepped forward, pulling Harper toward me, shielding her behind my back. My hand grasped hers. It was freezing cold. I looked at my mother, at Brandon, at Tiffany, and spoke very slowly, nailing each word into the floorboards. You just hit my wife in front of me. From this second on, I will not let her stay here for another minute. My mother looked at me as if she couldn't believe her ears. Perhaps she thought my words were just a momentary outburst of an angry son. She sneered, her voice as sharp as a razor. Go ahead and leave then. Let's see how you two survive out there. Don't think just because you have a little salary, you can act superior to your mother. I didn't reply to those words. If it were the old me, I would have tried to explain, tried to make my mother understand that I had never hesitated to give them anything. But that night, I suddenly understood one thing. some people refuse to hear the truth when they still want to believe the flattery. The more I argued, the more Harper would be dragged into another cycle of abuse. Tiffany sat next to my mother, looking down as if she were scared. But in the fraction of a second I glanced over, I clearly saw the corner of her mouth twitch upward into a very faint smirk. It was so fast that if you weren't paying attention, you'd think your eyes were playing tricks on you. It was the smile of someone who had just succeeded in pushing a thorn out of their side. As for Brandon, he slammed his hand hard on the table, spilling his wine onto the wood. "Kevin, you're taking this too far. It's just women arguing," Mom gotheated and slapped her to wake her up. "Why are you turning this into a massive deal? A man should know how to keep the peace in the family, not pack up and leave just because his wife cries a little." I turned to look at my brother. A slap to my wife's face, "And you call that just women arguing?" Brandon paused but kept his voice raised. "So, what do you want? You want Mom to apologize to her? Mom gave birth to you, raised you, and now because of your wife, you're going to humiliate Mom in front of the whole family?" I didn't answer him anymore. I just turned to Harper. Her cheek was bright red, a small trail of blood at the corner of her lip. I grabbed a napkin from the table and gently wiped it for her. She looked at me, tears overflowing, but her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm sorry. Because of me, you're put in a tough spot." That sentence tore my heart to shreds. She was the one who had been insulted and assaulted. Yet, the very first thing she thought about was my dilemma. I squeezed her hand tightly, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "The person who needs to apologize is not you." Having said that, I helped Harper up and guided her out of the dining room. Behind me, my mother was still yelling. She called me ungrateful, said I was brainwashed by my wife, said that a man led by a woman would never hold his head up high in life. Those words fell behind my back like heavy stones. But this time, I didn't turn around to pick them up. I walked straight down the hallway to the guest room where my wife and I stayed whenever we visited. The room wasn't large. Just a wooden bed, an old dresser, and a small desk. Harper stood at the doorway, her arms wrapped around herself, her face pale from both the pain and the humiliation. I opened the closet, grabbed the gray suitcase we kept on the top shelf, and began packing. I threw in our clothes, personal documents, laptops, phone chargers, and Harper's stomach medication and allergy pills. She suffered from seasonal allergies, a change in environment often caused her to break out in hives. My mother never remembered these small details, and Tiffany certainly didn't care. But for me, these were things I could never forget. Because they involved the woman I promised to take care of for the rest of my life. Outside the door, my mother's voice still echoed harshly. "Pack it up. Pack it all. And once you leave, don't come back crying." I'm telling you right now, in this house, a daughter-in-law doesn't get to talk back and then beg for forgiveness later. Harper gently pulled my arm. "Maybe we shouldn't, Kevin. Let's just go home first. Don't pack too much. I don't want Mom to get angrier." I looked at her and shook my head. We are not running away in a panic. We are leaving with dignity. We take what we need, and whatever needs clarifying will be clarified later. As I stepped out to the living room to grab a folder of documents from the drawer, I suddenly noticed a familiar envelope. It was a pale yellow envelope, the kind I always used to leave cash or a check for my mother whenever I visited. On the corner, my handwriting with the date was still visible, but on the front, someone had written another line in red ink. "From Tiffany, money for Mom's new smart fridge." I froze, a lump forming in my throat. Just last month, I had handed my mother that exact amount of money, telling her that if she wanted to upgrade their refrigerator, she should get a good one and not worry about the cost. And now, that money had become Tiffany's achievement. I looked over at the dining room, where Tiffany was still sitting next to my mother like a perfectly devoted daughter-in-law, and my heart turned ice cold. So many past incidents suddenly flooded my mind. The times I sent money to fix the HVAC, my mother bragged to the relatives that Brandon handled it. The premium supplements Harper bought, my mother claimed Tiffany was the thoughtful one. The days my wife quietly booked and paid for my father's specialist appointments, My mother praised her eldest daughter-in-law for being proactive. Perhaps we hadn't just been overlooked all this time, perhaps everything we did had been stolen and rebranded by someone else. I quietly pulled out my phone and took a photo of the envelope. Harper saw this, a flash of surprise in her eyes, but I signaled her to stay quiet. Now was not the time to drag everything out into a screaming match. When people are drunk on favoritism, a few words of explanation just sound like wind howling through a crack in the door. As I rolled the suitcase down the hallway, my father was standing there. Arthur was still wearing his old cardigan, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes heavy with sorrow. He didn't blame me, nor did he defend my mother. That silence made me sadder than any scolding could. He looked at Harper, then at me, his voice hoarse. "Kevin, take your wife and go home first. Whatever happens, we can deal with it tomorrow." I looked at my father for a long time. In that one sentence, I heard far more than just advice. He knew this house had problems. He knew my mother was blindly playing favorites. He knew Harper was suffering injustices. But just like always, he chose silence to avoid the storm. The only tragedy is that if you keep dodging the waves, eventually, one will come and wash the entire house away. I nodded and pulled the suitcase to the door. Harper walked beside me, her steps light but heavy as lead. Behind us, my mother was still screaming. "Once you leave, don't you ever show your faces here again. I'll consider it as if I never had this daughter-in-law." I stopped at the threshold, turning to look at my mother. She stood in the middle of the living room, her face flushed, one hand on her hip. Beside her was Tiffany, pretending to look down and wipe away tears. I was no longer loud or angry. In my heart, there was only a very clear, icy resolve. "Don't worry, Mom," I said slowly. "This time, I'm leaving, so you can finally understand who truly cares about you." With that, I took Harper's hand and walked out. The door clicked shut behind us, locking the screams inside a house that had been rotting from the inside for a long time. Outside, a light drizzle had begun to fall. It wasn't a heavy downpour, but a thin, cold, relentless mist that made the asphalt shimmer under the yellow streetlights. I popped the trunk, threw the suitcase in, and then opened the back door for Harper. She didn't say a word, just pulled her coat collar up. One hand cradled the cheek that had been slapped, while her other arm wrapped around my waist from the passenger seat as I started the engine. The drive from my parents' house in the suburbs to our small downtown apartment usually wasn't long, but that night, it felt endless. Storefronts along the road were mostly closed, leaving only a few late-night diners casting a dim glow. I drove slower than usual, not because of the rain, but because I could feel the person sitting next to me trembling intermittently. I didn't know if it was from the cold, the physical pain, or the massive amount of humiliation she had been forced to swallow. I didn't take Harper to her parents' house. In that moment, I knew that if my in-laws saw their daughter with a bruised cheek and a bleeding lip, everything would explode that very night. Her father loved her dearly. He would be heartbroken and enraged, and might even drive straight to my mother's house to demand answers. I didn't want one wrong to spiral into more unnecessary physical clashes. I just wanted to get my wife to a safe place first. Our apartment was close to our workplaces. We had been renting it for over a year. It wasn't spacious, just a living room, a bedroom, and a tiny kitchen. But it was the place where Harper could breathe the easiest. Here, there were no scrutinizing glares from my mother, no sickly sweet voices from Tiffany, and no bombastic, fake wealth stories from Brandon. As soon as we got inside, I turned on the lights, left the suitcase by the armchair, and went straight to the kitchen to wrap some ice in a clean towel. Harper sat on the edge of the sofa, her hair slightly damp from the rain, her left cheek now swollen and red. I sat down in front of her, gently pressing the cold compress to her face. She winced slightly. I asked softly, "Does it hurt a lot, honey?" Harper shook her head. But the tears started falling again. She didn't sob out loud, she just let the tears stream down to her chin. Each drop fell silently, like she had been holding them back for far too long. I set the ice pack down and reached out to wipe her tears. She suddenly grabbed my hand, her voice choked. "I can handle your mom not loving me." I can handle Tiffany picking on me and making snide remarks. But what I fear most is that because of me, you're stuck in the middle. I don't want people calling you an ungrateful son." Hearing that made my heart heavy. She was the one who got hit. She was the one kicked out of the house. Yet her biggest worry was still my reputation. I pulled her into my arms and spoke slowly. "I didn't choose to abandon my mom. I just chose not to let a wrong act be labeled as filial piety. If I stayed silent today, Mom might hit you again in the future. Tiffany could insult you 10 more times. And I would turn into the kind of husband who just stands by and watches his wife get humiliated." Harper hugged me tightly, and this time, she truly broke down. Her sobs were quiet, but they sounded unbearably agonizing. I let her cry for a while, then made her a cup of warm chamomile tea and used a little antiseptic to dab the small cut on her lip. Exhausted, she leaned back against the sofa and eventually drifted off to sleep. I grabbed a throw blanket to cover her, adjusting the pillows to make her more comfortable. The apartment grew quiet again, leaving only the sound of raindrops tap against the balcony glass. I sat at the dining table and unlocked my phone. My mind kept flashing back to that envelope with the words, "From Tiffany, money for Mom's new smart fridge." It was just a small detail, but it felt like a fishbone lodged in my throat that I couldn't swallow. I opened my mobile banking app and scrolled back through my transfer history over the past 2 years. Every transaction was clearly logged. Every month, I sent my mother money, sometimes $500, sometimes $800. When my dad had knee pain, I sent an extra $1,500 for his specialist copays. During Thanksgiving and Christmas, Harper would even remind me to send the money early so Mom could do her holiday shopping. Added up, it was a massive amount. Yet, during family gatherings, my mother constantly bragged that Brandon and Tiffany were the ones taking care of them, while Harper and I were supposed selfish and only cared about ourselves. I used to think my mother was just getting old and said those things because she wanted to prop up her eldest son. But now, looking at these cold numbers on the screen and remembering the stolen credit on that envelope, I realized something was deeply wrong. I took screenshots of several major transactions and saved them into a separate folder. Right at that moment, my phone suddenly vibrated. A text message from an unknown number popped up on the screen. The message was brief: "Kevin, watch out for Brandon and Tiffany. They are dragging your mom into a massive amount of debt." I sat up straight, my heart pounding. I immediately called the number back, but it just rang and went straight to voicemail. I called again, still no answer. Harper shifted slightly on the sofa. I quickly lowered the volume and stepped out onto the balcony. A few minutes later, the unknown number sent another photo. It was a screenshot of a Discord chat group with a flashy name, Alpha Growth VIP Inner Circle. Inside the chat, I saw a username that belonged to Brandon. There was another account using Tiffany's photo as a profile picture. The messages scrolling past made my blood run cold. "Put more in to cover the margin call. Can your mom co-sign the collateral? Don't let Kevin find out." I zoomed in to read every single word. Tiffany's smugness tonight. My mother's blind favoritism toward her. Suddenly, this wasn't just a simple mother-in-law and daughter-in-law drama anymore. Behind those cheap gifts and sweet flatteries, a financial trap had been set a long time ago. And my mother, blinded by her ego and favoritism, was likely being pushed off a cliff by the very people she trusted most. I looked back at Harper sleeping on the sofa, her cheeks still swollen. My heart ached for my wife, but my blood ran cold at the premonition of another massive storm approaching. I turned off the phone screen, telling myself I would investigate everything clearly the next morning. I wasn't going back to argue. I was going back to find the truth. I didn't know when I finally fell asleep. It was probably close to dawn when the rain on the balcony finally started to let up. Harper, after an exhausting night, was finally resting peacefully in bed. But my sleep was shallow. The text message from the unknown number, the Discord chats in the Alpha Growth group, and the altered envelope kept swirling in my head like shards of glass cutting into me. The next morning, I jolted awake because my phone was vibrating endlessly on the nightstand. At first, I thought it was my alarm, but when I reached for it, the screen was glowing bright white with a barrage of missed calls. The word Mom covered the screen. 23 missed calls. I hadn't even sat up completely when the phone buzzed again. The 24th call. Then 2526. I stared at the screen for a long time without answering. If my mother just wanted to scream at me for being ungrateful or demand I bring Harper back to apologize, she would have called once or twice and sent a nasty text. But calling relentlessly like this, at the crack of dawn, meant something was terribly wrong. I felt a heavy pit in my stomach. As if last night's storm was merely the first gust of wind, Harper woke up too. She sat up, her hair slightly messy, the slapped cheek now bruised a dark purplish red. Seeing my phone vibrating nonstop, she asked softly, "Is Mom calling?" What happened? I shook my head. I don't know yet. When the missed calls hit 40, then 50, I took a deep breath. I didn't want to answer the phone while being swept away by emotion. I set the phone on the table, turned on the speaker so Harper could hear, and pressed call back. It only rang once before the other side picked up. But my mother's voice was no longer the roaring tyrant from last night. It wasn't the sharp, cold voice that had banished my wife. Her voice was cracked, hoarse, and broken by sobs. Kevin, come home right now, please. Our house is being taken. We've been scammed. I'm going to die. I closed my eyes for a second, trying to keep my voice steady. Mom, speak clearly. What scam? My mother gasped between sobs. In the background, I could hear a commotion, my father yelling at someone, things crashing and shuffling around. My mother stuttered endlessly, as if she herself couldn't believe what was happening in her own home. This morning, some men showed up demanding money from Brandon. They said if they don't get the money today, they're going to make a massive scene and foreclose on the house. Kevin. How did it come to this? I gripped the phone tightly. How much is the debt? The line went silent for a few seconds. Then, my mother spoke very quietly, almost swallowed by her crying. Over $1 million. With the penalty interest, they said it's nearly $1.5 million. Harper, sitting beside me, froze. Even though I had read the warning text last night, my chest still felt like it had been packed with ice. Brandon, the man who talked about investing every night, who talked about upgrading his car, who acted like wealth was in the palm of his hand, was drowning in debt. I asked further, why is he in debt? My mother cried louder. He said it was some crypto or day trading thing. At first, he was making profits. He bragged to me that he made tens of thousands in a few days. Then Tiffany told me this was a rare opportunity. If we put in more capital, we could all be rich by the end of the year. I believed her. Hearing Tiffany's name, my heart sank. Harper looked down, her hands clasped tightly together. She didn't say a word, but her eyes grew incredibly cold. My mother continued through her sobs. It turned out that for months, Tiffany had used the excuses of buying supplements, a new fridge, remodeling the kitchen, and replacing appliances to siphon money from my mother. Some of it was cash, some was pulled directly from my mother's retirement accounts. Tiffany had sweet-talked her, saying she was doing it to make the house look respectable, so that when they finally had a grandson, he would have a perfect home. My mother believed her because Tiffany always had honey on her lips. Worse, Brandon and Tiffany had tricked my mother into signing a series of guarantor documents. They told her it was just a proof of assets form for a short-term bridge loan. They said once the market bounced back, the money would return instantly, paying off the loan and leaving a massive profit. My mother was old and didn't understand finance. Seeing her eldest son and daughter-in-law acting so confident, she signed it. Now, men had shown up at the house holding documents with my mother's signature, threatening that if they didn't pay, they would begin the legal process to seize the house under my parents' names. My mother was crying and talking hysterically. I thought she actually cared about me. Tiffany kept saying that when they struck it rich, she'd take me on vacation, buy me jewelry, and give me a beautiful grandson. She said Harper was clumsy and didn't know how to treat her in-laws, and that she was the only one looking out for this family. I was so stupid, Kevin. I turned to look at Harper. She was still sitting quietly. Her face was pale, her cheeks still swollen, her lips still slightly torn. The woman who had been kicked out of the house last night now had to listen to my mother confess how she had been conned by the exact same insults used to demean her. I stayed silent for a few seconds before speaking slowly. Last night, you slapped my wife and kicked her out. Today, you call me to save the house. Don't you find that ironic, Mom? The line went dead silent, and then my mother burst into wailing sobs. This wasn't the kind of crying she usually did to dominate a conversation. This was the cry of someone who had just been slapped in the face by reality. I was wrong, Kevin. I was so wrong about Harper. Can I talk to her? Please let me talk to her. I want to beg her. I want to apologize to her. Harper looked up at me. There was pain in her eyes, but no gloating. I knew my wife. She could be deeply hurt, but she was never the type to enjoy watching someone kneel before her just to feel like she won. I didn't hand the phone over immediately. I just said to my mother, "Now is not the time for crying and apologizing. I will come home. But I'm not coming home to listen to a pity party, and I'm not coming to pay off anyone's debt. I am coming home to expose exactly who turned this family into a target." My mother choked out my name a few times. I hung up the phone and stood up to grab my jacket. Harper slowly got out of bed as well. I turned to look at her. "You don't have to come if you're not ready." She stayed silent for a moment, then shook her head. "I'm going with you. Not because I'm over the pain, but because I want to see exactly how she manipulated Mom into hating me so much." I looked at Harper with a mixture of love and deep respect. This time, I was bringing my wife back to that house. But she was no longer the insulted daughter-in-law forced to leave with her head bowed. She was returning with me, armed with the calm resolve of someone holding the key to the entire truth about Brandon and Tiffany. I locked the apartment door and glanced at Harper one more time. The faint bruise was still on her cheek, her hair pulled back into a neat ponytail, her face slightly pale from a nearly sleepless night. I knew she still carried a lot of trauma. A person kicked out of her in-laws' house. Returning just one night later, if she didn't have immense inner strength, it would be hard just to walk through the front gate. I told my wife, "This time, you don't have to bow your head to anyone. We are going back to see the truth. If you feel overwhelmed, just stand behind me. And if anyone insults you one more time, I will pull you out of there instantly." Harper was quiet for a few seconds, then nodded. "I'm not afraid to go back. I'm just afraid your mom still won't wake up. But if we don't go, Mom might get dragged even further down by them." Her words made me admire her even more. Even now, she had no desire for revenge against my mother. She just wanted the truth exposed so a foolish old woman wouldn't continue to be exploited. I squeezed her hand tightly and we got into the car. When we pulled up to my parents' house, the moment I parked outside the driveway, I saw something was off. Two strange men were standing by the front gate smoking. One wore a black leather jacket, with tattoos crawling up his neck and wrists. The other kept peering into the yard while texting on his phone. Seeing me get out of the car, they looked me up and down with highly unfriendly glares. I asked, "Who are you looking for?" The guy in the black jacket blew a cloud of smoke and smirked. "Looking for someone who knows how to pay up." "You the youngest son? Go in there and talk some sense into your mom and your brother. Don't make us keep coming back." I didn't reply, just led Harper straight inside. The front yard, usual immaculate, was a mess. A lawn chair was knocked over, photocopied documents were scattered across the brick walkway, and my mother's prized potted plants were shoved aside. The front door was wide open. From the porch, I could already hear my mother sobbing. Martha was sitting on the living room floor, her hair a mess, her face so pale it looked as if she had aged 10 years overnight. The woman who had stood tall and kicked my wife out last night was now trembling, clutching her chest, her eyes swollen from crying. As soon as she saw me, she propped herself up, stumbled over, and grabbed my arm. "Kevin, save me, please. They really scammed me. The debt collectors are at our door." They threatened to take the house, threatened to make a scene so the whole neighborhood knows. What do I do, Kevin? I didn't push her hand away, but I didn't embrace her like I used to. There are times when you love your mother, but you still have to let her see the consequences of her own favoritism. I looked her straight in the eyes and denunciated every word. Do you want me to save you? Or do you want me to continue being a human ATM for Brandon and Tiffany? My mother froze. The hands gripping my arm slowly loosened. She looked down, her lips trembling, unable to speak a single word. Perhaps this was the first time she had heard me speak so bluntly. Or perhaps it was the first time she realized that her youngest son, whom she always thought was docile and easy to order around, was no longer willing to quietly shoulder someone else's mistakes. Right at that moment, Tiffany walked out from the kitchen. She was still wearing her nice loungewear, her hair neatly clipped, trying her best to maintain a calm facade. If you didn't notice her eyes darting nervously around the room, an outsider might think she was just a confused victim in all this. Oh good, Kevin is here, she said, softening her voice. Family matters should be kept behind closed doors. Mom is already terrified, so please don't say anything to stress her out more. Harper stood behind me in silence, but Tiffany couldn't resist an opening. She glanced at my wife, a sneer forming on her lips. Wow, my sister-in-law got scolded a little last night, and today she comes back to watch the circus? The house is a mess, don't make things worse. I whipped around, and the living room went dead silent. I stared at Tiffany, my voice low but razor sharp. Say one more insulting word to my wife, and I will turn around and leave right now. Whether this house sinks or swims, you can handle it yourself. Tiffany was stunned. My mother looked up at me, and then, for the first time in her life, she turned and yelled at Tiffany with genuine fury. Shut your mouth. I'm already losing my mind, don't you dare add fuel to the fire. That yell wasn't as loud as the one she used to scold Harper last night, but Tom, it was the first crack in the wall of favoritism my mother had built over the years. Tiffany bit her lip, her eyes flashing cold, but she didn't dare respond. From the stairs, Brandon walked down. He was wearing a wrinkled button-down shirt, his hair disheveled, but he still tried to wear his usual arrogant expression on his face. Seeing me, he forced a laugh. Kevin, don't listen to the thugs outside. It's just a temporary liquidity issue with my investments. The funds will clear in a few days and I'll handle it. I stared at him for a long time. If you can handle it, why are guys standing at the gate all morning? If it's just a liquidity issue, why did Mom call me six times? Brandon's face stiffened. He looked away. You don't understand the markets, bro. The market goes up and down, it's normal. I placed my phone on the coffee table, opening the folder with the screenshots I received last night, and said, I don't need to understand the market. I need to understand where the loan agreements are, which lending apps you used, where the collateral contracts are, and the bank statements showing where the money went. Put them all on the table. Tiffany immediately flared up. You're the younger brother, are you trying to interrogate us like criminals? The family is already humiliated enough, do you want to broadcast this for everyone to laugh at? I looked at her, then at Brandon, who was turning pale. This time, I was no longer the deferential younger brother, nor the son too afraid of making his mother sad to speak up. Only guilty people are afraid of an interrogation, I said. Only people hiding something are afraid of paperwork. You've hidden it long enough. Now they are standing at the gate threatening to take Mom and Dad's house, and you're worried about broadcasting it? Outside, the two strange men banged heavily on the iron gate. The sharp metallic sound echoed through the house. My mother flinched and clutched her chest. My father rushed to peek through the window blinds, his face turning ashen. That physical threat finally broke whatever remained of Brandon's ego. His hands shaking, he placed his phone on the table. I had already called Dave, an old college friend who worked as a personal financial advisor for small businesses. Dave wasn't a lawyer, but he was sharp enough to spot predatory loans and investment traps. Half an hour later, Dave arrived. Walking in, he scanned the paperwork scattered in the table, then looked at everyone's faces. He didn't ask personal questions, just got straight to the point. All right. Who has the phones, Who has the low-end documents? Who has the bank access? Put it all on the table. If I can't trace the money, I can't help. Brandon frowned immediately. This is my family's business. Why does an outsider need to know? I looked at him, my voice flat but firm. You've hidden it long enough. The guys outside are ready to foreclose on your parents, and you're worried about an outsider? Outside, another loud bang hit the gate. Brandon caved. He unlocked his phone. Dave opened the apps and the chat groups. The more he read, the grimmer his face became. Brandon's phone was filled with Discord and Telegram groups with flashy names: Hot Alpha Hunters, Inner Circle Returns, VIP Growth Lounge. Every message is designed to exploit greed. Put more in to cover your margin. Once-in-a-lifetime dip. Some guaranteed 30% monthly returns, an obvious Ponzi or pump-and-dump scheme to anyone with sense, but to someone drunk on the dream of getting rich quick, it was pure honey. My mother stood behind us, shaking as she listened. She stammered. You told we were just pooling some capital temporarily. Why are there so many groups? Brandon hung his head, his shoulders slumped. At first, I did make a profit, Mom. I put in 20 grand, a few days later, I pulled out 26. I thought I cracked the code. My buddies told me to go bigger, that the bigger the capital, the bigger the payout. Dave sighed. Classic pig butchering scam, they let you win a few times so you trust them, then they pull you in deeper. When you lose, they encourage you to take out margin loans to win it back. The more you try to recover, the deeper you sink. Harper stood next to me, silently jotting down dates and amounts on a notepad. She didn't interject, but every number she wrote down felt like a knife slicing through my brother and sister-in-law's fake facade. When we got to the transaction history, we found out Brandon didn't just use his own money. He had taken out hard money loans, used predatory lending apps, borrowed from acquaintances, and ultimately used my mother as a guarantor for several massive loans. My mother grabbed the edge of the table. I didn't sign up for this. I only signed the papers Tiffany gave me. She said it was a family asset declaration to get a lower interest rate. Tiffany jumped in immediately. Mom, that's not fair. I just gave you the papers to read. You agreed to sign them yourself. I didn't force you. I turned to her. Are you saying my mother read and understood the entire legal contract before signing it? Tiffany hesitated, then spoke defensively. Mom is older, but she's still sharp. Don't act like she was totally brainwashed. My mother looked at Tiffany, her eyes red. For the first time, her gaze held no absolute trust, but a very clear streak of suspicion. She asked quietly, Tiffany, you told me to sign to lower Brandon's interest rate. You said the money would clear in a few days. Why are they saying I put up the house as collateral? Tiffany bit her lip and looked away. I was just repeating what Brandon told me. Before I could speak, Harper placed her phone on the table. On the screen was the transfer history of all the money I had sent my mother, along with the photo of the altered envelope from last night. She spoke very softly. Mom, I didn't want to bring this up to claim credit. But if I don't, you'll continue to think Tiffany paid for everything. I backed up my wife, pulling up older transactions. The day I transferred money for the new smart fridge? The very next day, Tiffany posted a photo on Facebook bragging about picking out the perfect fridge for Mom. The day Harper ordered the premium joint supplements? A few days later, my mother was telling the neighbors how her eldest daughter-in-law took such good care of her. Even the scarf Tiffany gave yesterday, she had bragged in a group chat with her friends about buying it at a discount outlet, but told my mother it was a designer import from Europe. My mother stood frozen. She turned to Tiffany, her voice breaking. So all those things you bought for me, that was Kevin and Harper's money? Tiffany still refused to back down. She shrugged, her tone turning cold. Money that comes into this house is family money. I took the time to pick out the gifts. As long as you were happy, what does it matter? Are we really going to dissect who paid for a refrigerator now? That sentence was like a second slap, but this time, it landed squarely on my mother. She took a step back, her lips trembling. The person she had defended, the one she thought was so thoughtful and filial, was just using someone else's money to buy her own glory. Just then, a loud thud came from the front yard. A thick stack of photocopied papers was thrown over the gate, scattering across the porch. My father rushed out to pick them up, his face draining of color instantly. It was a photocopy of a promissory note with my mother's signature, Brandon's fingerprint, and a dense spreadsheet of compounding penalty interest. The total was nearly $1.5 million. My mother looked like she was about to collapse, dropping heavily onto the sofa. My father held the stack of papers, his hands shaking violently. He looked at Brandon for a long time before his voice rasped out. "You've killed your mother, Brandon. You're not broke because you lost money. You're broke because of your ego." The room fell into a suffocating silence. Brandon kept his head down, devoid of his usual boasting. As for Tiffany, it was the first time she didn't look smug. But I knew someone like her wouldn't surrender easily. When the truth is dragged into the light, manipulators rarely repent immediately. They find someone else to blame. And the real storm, I sensed, was only just beginning. The silence in the living room stretched until it became suffocating. The stack of loan papers lay on the coffee table like a death sentence. My mother sat paralyzed, hands over her chest. Brandon stared at the floor, stripped of his usual bravado. Tiffany was the only one who regained her composure quickly. I watched her eyes shift from panic to cold calculation, evaluating her exit routes. She pulled out a chair, sat down, took a deep breath, and spoke. Her voice was stripped of its usual syrupy sweetness. "Let me make this clear. These loans were taken out by Brandon. Mom signed the papers. I am just a wife. Whatever my husband says, I follow. Do not look at me like I orchestrated this entire thing." Brandon's head snapped up. "Tiffany, what are you saying? You're the one who told me to put more in to cover the margin. You're the one who said Mom still had her retirement fund and we could borrow against the house for a few days." Tiffany glared at her husband. "You are a grown man, you make your own decisions. Did I hold your hand and force you to click buy? Did I hold a gun to Mom's head to sign the paper? Don't lose all your money and then dump the blame on your wife." Her words hit Brandon like a physical blow. The woman who sat next to him talking about luxury cruises, wealth, and proving their superiority to the family was now wiping her hands clean as if brushing dust off her coat. I saw the color drain from his face, his mouth opening and closing without a sound. Tiffany wasn't finished. She turned her sharp gaze to Harper. "And you too, Harper. I know you've hated me for a long time. You couldn't stand that Mom loved me more, right? Now that there's a little drama, you pull out your bank statements and your envelopes to smear my name. You're really good at playing the innocent victim while stabbing people in the back." Harper stood next to me, her face still bearing the bruise, but her eyes were extraordinarily calm. She didn't yell. She didn't rush to defend herself. She just looked at Tiffany and spoke slowly. "I don't need to smear your name. The person smearing names is the one who passes off a discount scarf as a designer import and passes off my husband's money as her own filial piety. You stole other people's credit to buy Mom's love, and now you accuse me of stabbing you in the back?" Her voice wasn't loud, but it was so sharp the entire room went dead quiet. Tiffany opened her mouth to argue, then snapped it shut. The evidence was sitting right there on the table. Even if she wanted to act, she had run out of stage. Realizing logic wouldn't save her, Tiffany immediately pivoted. She grabbed her stomach, grimaced in pain, and slumped back in her chair. "I feel sick. Stop reassuring me. You are all ganging up to bully one woman. Is that fair? I'm a daughter-in-law in this house too. My life hasn't been a walk in the park either." Seeing her clutch her stomach, my mother instinctively took a step forward to help her. But my father, who had been quiet this whole time, suddenly barked, "Martha, if you misplace your pity one more time, we are going to lose this house for real." My mother froze. My father's words severed the last thread of her blind sympathy. I saw her pull her hand back, tears welling up again. But this time, she didn't rush to Tiffany's side. She sank into the nearest chair, looking like a woman who had finally realized that misplaced kindness could bring forth a catastrophe. I pulled a stack of blank printer paper from a drawer and set it in the middle of the table. Right now, who borrowed the money, who signed the papers, who received the funds, who transferred them? Write it all down. No more arguing. We establish a family record first, then we take this to the authorities depending on the severity. Tiffany reacted instantly. Are you playing detective now? We're family, and you want written confessions? Signatures? You want to back us into a corner, Kevin? I looked her dead in the eye. The corner was created by whoever took out the loans. The paper and ink are just to make sure no one can use tears to rewrite the truth anymore. Brandon shakily picked up a pen. He managed a few lines before his hand cramped up. Tiffany adamantly refused to touch the pen. While everyone was focused on the paper, Harper lightly tapped my arm. I followed her gaze. Tiffany was looking down, furiously typing a text message, thinking no one was watching. Her phone screen lit up with a short sentence that sent a chill down my spine. Did you get the house deed tonight? I stepped forward immediately. Tiffany jumped, slamming her phone face down on the table, her face draining of color. I asked point blank, what house deed? The room went dead silent. My mother's head snapped up, pure panic in her eyes. My father jumped to his feet. I turned to my mother. Where is the deed to this house? My mother stammered, her face turning chalk white. Yesterday. Tiffany said she needed to borrow it to take photos for proof of assets. She said it was to get the lenders to lower the interest rate. She told me she was just going to snap a few pictures and put it right back in the safe. I didn't wait for her to finish. I sprinted into the back office and yanked open the wooden cabinet where my parents kept their important documents. The drawer was empty. The heavy brown envelope, containing the original title to the house, was gone. I walked back into the living room, staring at Tiffany. She couldn't fake being sick anymore. Her eyes darted wildly toward the front door. My father slammed his hands on the table, his voice a guttural rasp. Tiffany. Where is the deed? Tiffany shot up from her chair. I don't know. I took pictures for Mom, and I left it somewhere in the room. Stop trying to pin this on me. With that, she suddenly lunged for the front door. But Harper was faster. She stepped right into the doorway, blocking the exit. My wife didn't raise her voice. She just stood tall, her tone rock solid. You can go wherever you want, but the deed stays here. Tiffany ground her teeth, her face twisting in rage. Get out of my way. You think just because your husband is backing you, you can act tough? This is my family's business, don't you dare interfere. I was about to step in when my mother suddenly stood up. She swayed on her feet, but she walked over and pulled Harper behind her back. The mother who had slapped my wife and kicked her out last night was now standing as a shield in front of her youngest daughter-in-law. Her whole body was shaking, but her voice was surprisingly fierce. If you want to touch Harper, you'll have to step over my dead body. Her declaration rang through the chaotic room. Harper stood behind my mother, her eyes red. I doubt even she expected the woman who assaulted her the night before to defend her so fiercely this morning. Tiffany was even more shocked. Her face contorted with fury. The mask of the sweet, understanding, perfect daughter-in-law she had worn for years melted away in seconds. She scoffed, her voice dripping with venom. Wow, Mom. That's rich. Yesterday you said Harper was trash, today you're taking her side? Are you gone and senile? Or did Kevin and his wife brainwash you? My mother trembled. But this time, she didn't shrink back. She looked at Tiffany, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. They weren't tears of fear from the loan sharks, nor were they manipulative tears to get her children in line. They were the tears of someone recognizing their own utter foolishness. She choked out every word, slicing into her own pride. I was a fool because of your sweet talk. I slapped the daughter-in-law who actually loved me, and I embraced the one who was gutting my home. I am old and stupid, but I am not so blind that I'll stand here and watch you destroy this family while I protect you. Harper stood frozen. Her tears finally fell, but she kept her composure. I knew this apology wasn't enough to erase last night's slap, nor the years of neglect. But at least it was the first time my mother had named her own mistakes out loud. For a woman who had worn her pride like armor her entire life, saying those words was equivalent to stripping away her own skin. Brandon looked like he couldn't stand on his own 2 feet anymore. He collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands. The older brother, who used to beat Hishist, claiming he knew business, knew investing, and knew how to provide for the family's future, was now just a failed man crushed by his own greed and ego. He spoke barely above a whisper. At first, it was my buddies who dragged me in. They said it was a private trading group, guaranteed stock picks. I threw in a little money. It made our turn. I thought it was my time. I thought if I just went big, I could buy a new Porsche, buy a vacation home, make Mom proud. My dad stood nearby, his eyes red, but he didn't interrupt. Brandon continued, his voice breaking. Then I lost it. The more I lost, the more I hid it. Tiffany told me if I lost, I had to win it back, otherwise we'd lose everything. She said Mom still had her $401k, that we could take a HELOC out in the house for a few days to cover the margin calls. I was so stupid. I thought I just needed one big win to make it all go away. Tiffany shrieked. Don't you dare blame me. Without me, you'd just be a loudmouth with empty pockets your whole life. You loved showing off to Mom, you loved acting like a big shot, you loved making the relatives respect you. Now that you lost, it's all your wife's fault. Those words pierced whatever was left of Brandon's ego. He looked up at his wife, his eyes hollow. Perhaps in that moment, he finally realized the woman who stood beside him in all those fantasies of wealth wasn't there because she believed in him. She was using him as a ladder. And when the ladder broke, she was fully prepared to kick it down. I didn't let the argument drag on. I looked at Brandon and demanded, call whoever has the deed right now. Ask them where they are and who holds the papers. Brandon shakily picked up his phone. He dialed a number, but no one answered. He tried several more times, but it just rang out. Finally, his arm dropped, all the color drained from his face. I don't know. I didn't know Tiffany took the deed. I only heard her say she gave it to a broker to negotiate a lower rate. I don't know where it is. I turned to Tiffany. She took a half step back but maintained her defiance. I already told you I don't know. If you want it, go find it yourself. At that moment, Harper spoke up. Her voice was light, but remarkably sharp. Kevin, do we have a security camera pointing at the driveway? Also, there's a FedEx print center down the street. If Tiffany went to make photocopies of the documents, there has to be footage. My father suddenly remembered. That's right. Yesterday morning, Tiffany said she was going to photocopy some papers for Mom. She even asked me what time the FedEx store opened. I immediately stood up. My father grabbed his jacket and followed me. Before walking out the door, I turned to Harper. Stay here with Mom. If she tries to leave, call the cops. Harper nodded. My mother stood close to her, her eyes far more resolute than before. She said softly, Don't worry. I won't let her lay a finger on you. My father and I ran down to the FedEx store at the corner. The manager was a middle-aged guy who recognized my dad from the neighborhood. When we explained that property documents might have been taken without permission, he was hesitant at first. But when my dad mentioned it was the deed to his house, the manager agreed to pull up yesterday morning's security footage. On the screen, the image was crystal clear. Tiffany walked into the store holding a large brown envelope. Walking right beside her was a man in a black leather jacket with a tattoo on his wrist, the exact same debt collector who had been standing outside our gate. They stood at the counter, photocopied dozens of pages, and then the tattooed man took the brown envelope containing the original deed. Tiffany looked around nervously before walking out with him. I pulled out my phone and recorded the security monitor. My heart hammering against my ribs. My father stood next to me, his face ash gray. He only muttered one sentence, she actually gave it to them. When we got back to the house, the second Tiffany saw my phone, her face drained of all color. I played the video right in front of everyone. There were no Morleys that could save her. My mother watched the screen, then suddenly turned to Harper. She dropped to her knees right in front of my wife, a wail of pure agony ripping from her throat. I was so wrong. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I just beg you. Please don't let this family die by my hands. Harper, panicked, quickly bent down to pull her up. She was crying too, but her voice was steady. I'm not helping because I'm not angry anymore, Mom. I am still angry. But I am helping because if we let bad people win, this family will never have a way back. Hearing that, my eyes burned. In the middle of a house ravaged by a storm, the person who had been hurt the most was the one holding the pillars so the roof wouldn't cave in entirely. After the footage from the FedEx store was revealed, I knew this had escalated far beyond a family spat. This wasn't just about a sister-in-law using sweet words to win favor, or an older brother's fragile ego leading him into debt. The deed had been handed over, the predatory loan contracts were signed, and the collectors were at the gate. If we handled this emotionally, one misstep could mean losing the house my parents spent their whole lives paying for. I immediately called Dave, my financial advisor friend, who conferenced an lawyer contact of his. I didn't ramble, I gave him the 3 bullet points. My mother signed documents under false pretenses. The deed was removed from the home by Tiffany without my father's consent. And there was a group of individuals outside using intimidation to extort money. The lawyer on the phone was quiet for a second, then spoke firmly. Kevin. First, you need to file a police report regarding the unauthorized removal of the property deed. Second, get written statements about the signing of the guarantor documents, who said what, who presented the papers, who witnessed it. Do not let them turn your family's silence into implied consent. I put the phone on speaker so everyone could hear. My mother sat on the chair, her hands shaking violently. She had always been terrified of airing the family's dirty laundry. To her, appearances were often heavier than the truth. But right now, hearing that if she didn't file a report, these people could use her signature to literally force her onto the street, she broke. She bowed her head, her voice gravelly. I'll sign the police report. I was wrong to trust the wrong person, I have to own up to it. I grabbed paper and started writing down the outline, the lawyer suggested. My mother read along, crying as I wrote. Every word on that police report felt like a knife slicing away her pride. Because she listened to Tiffany, because she was greedy for high returns, because she didn't read the paperwork carefully, because she handed the deed over under the guise of lowering interest rates. With every sentence, her face grew paler. Brandon also sat down at the table. At first, he was still shaking, unable to hold the pen steady. I looked at him and said flatly, Brandon, from this moment on, you have to tell the complete truth. Hiding a single loan, hiding a single transfer, hiding a single broker is equivalent to handing the knife to a stranger to stab your own family. Drop the ego. Your ego is not worth our parents' house. Brandon burst into tears. A man in his 30s, who used to strut around claiming he knew everyone and everything, was now slumped over the table like a disciplined child. He sobbed, Kevin. My whole life. I was terrified of losing to you. You don't talk much. But everything you do is solid. I was hollow, so I had to brag. I was terrified, Mom would see me as less than you, terrified their relatives would call me useless. And in the end, I dragged the whole family into the mud. His words made my dad look away. I saw his shoulders shake, but he didn't yell. Perhaps he knew that now was the time for Brandon to look at himself in the mirror, not the time for more humiliation. Harper stood quietly beside me. She was still furious. I knew the bruise on her cheek hadn't faded, and the wound in her heart wouldn't heal after just one morning. Yet, seeing my mother trembling so hard she couldn't hold a glass of water, she quietly went into the kitchen. A moment later, she brought out a warm cup of ginger tea and placed it in front of my mother. Drink a little, Mom. You're freezing. My mother looked up, staring at the cup, then at Harper. Tears spilled continuously from her eyes. Her shaking hands took the cup, her voice choked. Yesterday I slapped you, and today you bring me tea. I've lived all these years, only to be outclassed by your kindness. Harper didn't say it's okay. She didn't rush to forgive, just to make things easier. She replied very softly, I am still hurt, Mom. But right now, we need to save the house. As for right and wrong, we have plenty of time to figure that out later. That sentence silenced the room. It wasn't fake sweetness, nor was it cold detachment. It had boundaries, but it also had humanity. I looked at my wife, a profound sense of gratitude rising in my chest. It was her incredible composure that kept our family from entirely shattering in the midst of this chaos. We thought we finally had things under control. The police statements were drafted. Brandon had written out the full list of his loans and investment groups. My dad gathered every remaining piece of financial paperwork in the house. I was getting ready to drive everyone to the precinct to file the reports when my mother's phone suddenly started ringing off the hook, not just one call. Dozens of calls from aunts, uncles, and cousins. Her screen lit up with name after name, followed by short text messages that hit like bricks. Martha, why are you letting your youngest daughter-in-law force you to sign away your house? Kevin abandoned you when things got tough, now he's playing the savior? Don't let his wife take over the family. My mother held the phone, her face ghost white. She opened the family Facebook group, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped the device. A short video clip was being shared rapidly. In the clip, Harper was standing in front of Tiffany at the living room door, her voice firm. You can go wherever you want, but the deed stays here. Then it cut immediately to my mother sitting at the table, crying while signing the police report. But the entire context, the part where Tiffany admitted taking the deed, the part where my mother admitted being scammed, was completely edited out. The caption attached to the video was even more venomous. The youngest daughter-in-law gets scolded one night, and the next day she brings her husband back to force her mother-in-law to sign over the house. People are terrifying these days. The person who uploaded it was none other than Tiffany. She had struck first, using the court of public opinion among the extended family to attack my mother's greatest weakness, her pride. All her life, my mother feared being judged by the relatives. Now, Tiffany was using that exact fear to force her into a defensive corner. My mother slumped back into the chair, looking utterly defeated. Kevin. Maybe I should just stay quiet. The more we talk, the more they laugh. I've lived this long, I can't take having the whole family pointing fingers at me like this. I was about to speak, but Harper placed her hand over my mother's. Her face still looked exhausted, the bruise visible, but her voice was gentle and unwavering. If you stay quiet, Mom, the liar gets to live in their lie. You don't need to defend me. You just need to tell the truth. Where we went wrong, we admit it. But we don't carry the blame for things we didn't do. My mother looked at Harper, her eyes red. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. I knew she was battling immense shame and regret. The woman she had banished was teaching her how to stand tall against slander. I pulled up a chair next to my mom and spoke slowly. Mom, don't play the victim, and don't curse Tiffany out. Just state the facts and own your mistake. The relatives might not sympathize right away, but at least they'll know who is turning black into white. My mother sat in silence for a long time, then finally nodded. She didn't want to record a video because she looked too haggard. She asked to just record an audio message. I opened the voice memo app and placed it in front of her. She took a deep breath, her hands still shaking, but when she spoke, her voice was much clearer than I expected. To all my brothers, sisters, and family. It's Martha. What happened today has caused an uproar, and I am deeply ashamed. But I cannot stay silent anymore. The first person in the wrong is me. I played favorites. I slapped a good daughter-in-law because I let a flatterer lead me by the nose. She choked up. Harper handed her a glass of water. My mother took a sip and continued. For years, Kevin and Harper have quietly paid for my medical bills and home repairs. But I was stupid. I listened to Tiffany's sweet talk, thinking she was the filial one. I insulted Harper and hit her at the dinner table. I admit my mistake to this family, and I am not blaming anyone else. In the family group chat, people started sending the typing bubbles, then went quiet. My mother kept going, clearly explaining how Tiffany took the house deed under the guise of lowering interest rates, how the deed ended up in the hands of predatory lenders. She stated that we had security footage, text messages, and witnesses. She heavily emphasized that Harper never forced her to sign away the house. In fact, Harper was the one helping her save it. When the audio message was sent, the living room fell dead silent. A few minutes later, the first replies in the family group chat began to change their tune. An uncle wrote, "If what Martha is saying is true." Tiffany crossed a massive line. An aunt replied, "Harper got slapped and still came back to help the family. That takes real character." The people who had been calling to yell at my mother suddenly went quiet. A few even sent private messages apologizing for jumping to conclusions. Reading those texts, tears dripped onto my mother's phone screen. Not because people were defending her, but because she had finally dared to rip off the bandage of her own pride and show her mistakes to the world. I was sure Tiffany was reading those messages too. Less than half an hour later, Brandon got an alert on his phone from his bank. Someone was attempting to withdraw a massive amount of cash from their joint checking account. He turned pale and opened the app. Not only that, but he realized the expensive jewelry from their shared home safe was likely gone, and his luxury car had just been hastily listed on a local Facebook marketplace group. He looked at me, his voice cracking. "She's actually making a run for it." This time, Brandon didn't panic uselessly. He immediately called the bank's fraud department, freezing the joint accounts due to disputed assets and suspicious activity. He documented every alert and recorded the call with the bank representative. I looked at my brother. The man who had been bloated with fake pride now had a grim, delayed clarity in his eyes. He said to me, "Kevin, I'm not asking you to save me from the consequences. I just want to fix what I broke. From now on, whatever papers need signing, whatever statements need to be made, I'll do it myself. It's my debt, I will pay it. I won't let Mom, Dad, or you carry it anymore." I nodded. "I will help you navigate the legal process. But you have to remember, you pay this debt with your own sweat. Nobody is paying to preserve your ego anymore." "I understand," Brandon said quietly. Right at that moment, Brandon's phone rang. It was Tiffany. He put it on speaker. Her voice was no longer whiny or victimized. It was dripping with venom. "You froze the accounts? You think that's going to stop me? If I don't have the cash to pay them, Trent's guys are going to come after your whole family. Don't blame me for being ruthless." Brandon gripped the phone, but he didn't scream back. He just said, "Tiffany, you chose this path. Don't drag anyone else down with you." She laughed coldly and hung up. A moment later, Brandon received a text from an unknown number. "Tell your wife to pay up, or don't blame us for what happens next." I stared at the screen, my heart sinking. Blocked from taking the cash, Tiffany had called the loan sharks in a fit of rage to redirect their pressure onto my family. But she didn't realize that once you involve greedy, dangerous people, you are often the first one they turn on. She might very well be the one caught in her own trap. The text threat was enough to make Brandon slump back into his chair. He was no longer the loud, chaotic mess he was earlier. He just stared at the screen, eyes bloodshot. Perhaps he finally realized that the people who used to pat his back, calling him a savvy investor, only saw him as prey. When the money was flowing, they were sweet. When the money stopped, they went for the throat. I took Brandon's phone, took screenshots of the threats, and said, "From now on, nobody texts them back privately. Document everything. People who use threats to collect debts don't back down just because you're scared." Brandon nodded. My mother sat nearby, holding her chest. Harper quietly poured another glass of warm water and set it in front of her. She didn't offer grand words of comfort, but that small gesture was enough to make my mother bow her head and cry. I knew my wife hadn't forgotten the slap. But she still maintained her humanity when someone else was suffering. That made me love her even more. The next morning, we were all called down to the local police precinct to provide supplemental statements. Not just my family. Trent, the loan shark, and Tiffany had been brought in as well. In the car ride over, my mother clutched a canvas tote bag on her lap containing her handwritten statement and the financial documents. She turned to Harper, her voice barely a whisper. "Harper. Later. If I get too nervous, can you remind me what to say?" Harper looked at her for a moment, then nodded. "Just say exactly what happened, Mom. I won't speak for you, but I will sit right next to you." That response was perfectly measured. It wasn't an easy forgiveness, nor was it a cold rejection. It was like a hand placed firmly on someone's back, not pushing, not pulling, just letting a trembling woman know she wasn't abandoned. At the precinct, Tiffany was already there in an interview room. She was wearing a crisp white blouse, her hair tied neatly, wearing light makeup to project her usual image of an elegant, put-together woman. As soon as she saw my mother, she stood up, her eyes red. "Mom, please tell them. I really didn't mean to hurt the family. I just wanted to secure a bridge loan to get us through a tough spot." I looked at my mother. Her hands were visibly shaking. A few days ago, she absolutely would have softened. But today, she just stared at Tiffany for a long time before slowly sitting down. She didn't yell or scream, she just spoke in a raspy, exhausted voice. "I loved you, which is why I was blind. But if I love you blindly one more time, I will destroy my own family." Tiffany froze. The sweet title of mom that she had used to unlock doors for years no longer worked. The interviews began. My mother recounted the entire process of Tiffany bringing her the papers. How she was told it was just a proof of assets to lower an interest rate. How they promised the money would clear in days. She explained how she trusted her eldest daughter-in-law and handed over the original deed Toby photocopied. When she reached that part, she broke down in tears. "I was greedy for the compliments, I was greedy for the pride of having a successful daughter-in-law, and I almost lost my house. I was wrong, but I had no idea those papers were for a predatory loan. And I never consented to my house being put up as collateral." Harper sat next to her, silently handing her tissues. She didn't interrupt, didn't add dramatic commentary, didn't try to play the victim for the detectives. Her silence gave my mother's words even more weight. When it was Brandon's turn, he didn't dodge the questions anymore. He admitted his lack of financial literacy, how he was blinded by promises of massive returns, and how he took out margin loans to chase his losses. He clearly stated that Tiffany repeatedly pressured him to use his mother's retirement funds and the house's equity as leverage, even promising a cut to the brokers if they got the loan approved quickly. His voice shook, but every sentence was clear. "I take responsibility for my mistakes. I will cooperate and pay the debts that belong to me." But I wanted on record that my parents did not understand what they were signing. My wife exploited my mother's trust to take the deed to their home. Trent, the loan shark, was sitting in another room. At first, he was arrogant, but when the detectives pulled out printouts of the text messages between him and Tiffany, his demeanor shifted. In the texts, Tiffany actively promised to deliver the deed, noting that her mother-in-law was old and easy to manipulate, and her husband was desperate enough to go along with it. One text from Tiffany read, "I'll handle the paperwork. When the cash drops, we take our cut of the fees first. And I'll figure out the house later." When that text was read aloud, Tiffany turned ashen. She stuttered, "No. I just said that to buy time, I didn't mean it." But the evidence was overwhelming. The texts, the FedEx security footage, the audio recordings, my mother's statement, Brandon's confession, and her attempt to drain the bank accounts and flee. The disconnected puzzle pieces finally formed a crystal-clear picture. Trent wasn't getting off easy either. The investigation revealed his group was running an illegal, unlicensed lending operation with extortionate interest rates and a history of harassment. When he realized they were digging into Heist's other operations, his cockiness vanished. He glared at Tiffany with pure hatred, realizing she was the one who had brought the cops to his doorstep. Tiffany was now truly panicking. She burst into tears, turning to my mother, her voice switching back to that sickeningly sweet tone. "Mom, I know I messed up. Please say something to help me. I was your daughter-in-law, I took care of you. My mother closed her eyes. Tears leaked out, but when she opened them, her voice was more decisive than ever. You took care of me using Kevin's money and Harper's effort, and then you used my trust to mortgage my house. That's not taking care of someone. That's digging a grave for my family. Tiffany collapsed into her chair. For the first time, she had absolutely nothing left to say. The case was officially documented. The fraudulent behavior regarding the loans, the theft of the deed, and the coercion of an elderly person were all entered into the record for prosecution. Brandon also filed for divorce. There was no screaming, no drama, he just signed the papers with a shaking but resolute hand. When we walked out of the precinct, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot. My mother walked slowly. Harper stayed exactly half a step beside her, ready to catch her if she stumbled. Brandon stood next to me, staring at the asphalt. I said softly, "There are some lessons that come with a very painful price tag, Brandon. But you have to pay it if you want to walk a clean path going forward." He nodded silently. I looked back toward the station where Tiffany was still being held for further questioning. I felt no loud, vengeful triumph in my heart. Just a very clear realization: the person who tried to use someone else's home as an escape route ended up locking herself in a cage. You reap what you sow. After that day, my parents did not lose their house. The deed was placed in a brand new safe, and this time, the key wasn't left casually in an unlocked drawer. But saving the house didn't mean everything magically went back to normal. The legitimate portions of the debt still existed, and Brandon's responsibility couldn't be wiped away with a few tears of remorse. I told him straight up, "I will help you organize the legal and financial mess, but I am not paying off your debt. If I bail you out, your debt disappears today. But you will never learn how to stand on your own 2 feet." Brandon just bowed his head. He didn't get defensive or angry. He sold the luxury SUV he had bought to maintain his image, cut out every single unnecessary expense, and took a job managing inventory at a friend's warehouse. The job wasn't glamorous, and the pay was a fraction of what he used to brag about, but it was steady and honest work. One night, he called me. His voice was much lighter. "Kevin, for the first time in my life, I feel relieved that I don't have to pretend to be rich anymore. Being a little broke but actually being able to sleep at night. Turns out, it's not that bad." Hearing that, I felt a weight lift. Sometimes, people don't die from a lack of money. They slowly suffocate from trying to live inside a shell that doesn't belong to them. Brandon had to take a very painful detour to learn that, but at least he turned back in time. My mother changed, too. She stopped bragging to the neighbors about which daughter-in-law bought what. The silk scarves, the premium gift baskets, and the superficial displays of wealth suddenly seemed hollow to her. She started looking for real actions, real character, instead of sweet words. Once, I came over and saw her meticulously writing down every dollar Harper and I had sent her over the years in a little notebook. I told her, "Mom, you don't need to do that." She shook her head, tears welling up. "I'm not writing it down to pay you back. I'm writing it down so I never forget who I took for granted." On a Sunday evening, a few weeks later, my mother called me. Her voice on the phone was hesitant, entirely devoid of the commanding tone she used to have. She asked, "If Harper is up for it, could you bring her over for dinner? I Madero's chicken and mac and cheese." She mentioned she liked my recipe last year. I looked over at Harper. She was quiet for a moment, then nodded. I understood that nod didn't mean all the wounds were magically healed. It just meant her heart was big enough to give them a second chance, while maintaining boundaries for herself. Dinner that night was very different. There were no comparisons, no fake laughter from Tiffany, and no bombastic monologues from Brandon. The table was simple: roast chicken, some steamed vegetables, mac and cheese, and a salad. My mother personally served a piece of chicken onto Harper's plate. She looked at my wife, her voice choking up. "The last time we had dinner, I told you to leave. Tonight, I'm inviting you back to this family, if you are still willing to give me a chance." Harper picked up her fork, her eyes slightly red. She didn't force a smile, nor did she offer a perfectly polite, overly generous response to make everyone feel instantly better. She just replied softly, "I am still hurt, Mom. But I also want everyone to treat each other better. If you truly change, Mom, I will see it." My mother nodded repeatedly. My father, sitting next to her, let out a very deep sigh. He raised his glass of water, looked at Harper, and said, "I am at fault too. I stayed quiet for far too long." We older folks often think staying quiet keeps the peace, but it turns out, silence just lets the wrongs grow bigger. "I am sorry, Harper." Harper looked down. I felt her hand squeeze mine tightly under the table. The atmosphere wasn't exactly joyous, but it was profoundly real. Some families, after a massive crisis, can never go back to the way they were. But if everyone is honest enough, they can start over in a much better, more authentic way. Brandon arrived a little late. He was wearing a dark blue warehouse uniform, his face tanned from working on the loading dock. He set a small bag of oranges on the table, looking embarrassed as he mentioned he bought them with his first paycheck from the warehouse. He stood in front of Harper and bowed his head deeply. "I want to apologize to you again. If you hadn't stood your ground that night, if Kevin hadn't taken you out of here, this family would probably still be blind. I don't expect you to forget what happened, but I hope as I live a more honest life, you'll hate me a little less." Harper looked at him and said quietly, "You don't need to say much. Just treat Mom and Dad well, and pay off your debts with your own hard work. That's enough." As for Tiffany, she eventually had to face the full legal consequences of her actions. Her marriage to Brandon was over, and her involvement in the fraudulent loans, the stolen deed, and colluding with predatory lenders caught up with her. Trent's crew never bothered my family again, as they were hit with a massive federal investigation into their extortion racket. The person who thought she could use my parents' home as her personal escape hatch ended up locking herself in a prison of her own making. After everything, Harper kept a healthy distance from my family. She still visited my parents, bought my mom cough medicine when she was sick, and reminded me to call my dad. But she never again allowed anyone to mistake her kindness for weakness. My mother understood that, too. She didn't demand instant forgiveness, but quietly made amends, little by little, in the way she spoke and the way she treated us. As for me, I learned a vital lesson. A family isn't a place where the person who is right has to suffer in silence just to keep the peace. And it isn't a place where the person who is wrong gets an automatic pardon just by shedding a few tears. A true family is a place where those who make mistakes learn to bow their heads and fix them, where those who are hurt have the right to set boundaries, and where those who still have a conscience pull each other out of the wreckage, together. The slap at that dinner table felt like it had shattered everything, but sometimes, a crack is exactly what you need to expose the rot that has been hidden for far too long. Tiffany sowed manipulation and reaped isolation. Brandon sowed ego and had to pay for it with his sweat. My mother, after a devastating fall, I learned that a good daughter-in-law doesn't need a sweeten, she just needs to be the one who doesn't walk away when the house is burning down. And my wife and I, after it all, learned how to love others without ever losing ourselves again.